Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Stacy Owen. I'm from the Alumni Engagement Team. Thanks so much for being here for today's session, Leading New Generations, which is facilitated by Dr. Pat Sweeney, who's the Executive Director of the Allegacy Center for Leadership and Character, and also one of our professors of practice. And Pat has taught across our programs and has so many fantastic experiences. Some of you may have heard previous sessions, but we're delighted to have him here today, also with some of his team members who you will meet over the next hour. Pat, thanks for doing this. I can't wait to learn more about your content.
Oh, Stacy, thank you, and welcome everybody. This is a great topic. I know a lot of business leaders are struggling with it, and I've had a lot of multiple discussions when I engage with them. Is how do you attract and retain talent from the younger generations? And so we'll explore that today and kind of get at it. But I'd like to also introduce the legacy team: Lynn Myers, who's the Senior Operations Manager, and Jennifer Johnson, who runs everything and keeps us organized. They're here on the team here. But anyway, to begin with, I'd like to just kind of define what are the younger generations. Now, the Gen Y or the millennials, if people were born from 1980 to 1996, they fall in the millennials. And again, these years, depending on what group you are, they may slip to 2 or 3 years, but roughly in that cohort would be the millennials. Now, the Gen Zs are 1997 to 2012. If you're born in that period, you're a Gen Z. Now, currently, the millennials make up 35% of the workforce. The Gen Zs make up 5% of the workforce. So we're talking roughly about 40% of the workforce are made up of the younger generations. And what I'd like to explore here first, and we'll do it in breakouts and we can kind of do it, but based on your experience and working with the millennials and the Gen Zs who were just graduating now, they're entering the workforce, what do they value? What do the millennials value and what do the Gen Zs value? And based on your experience, what is the best way to lead the two younger generations? And is there a difference between the generations? Lynn will drop that in chat and we can kind of go into the breakout groups and discuss this, and we'll come back. I want to ask you not to use the internet. I would like to know, just based on your experiences, what do you see what do the Gen Zs and the millennials value, and how best to lead them? And so anyway, I know leaders are struggling with this now. And so we'll kind of come up with it. We'll process it. I'll share some research, and then we'll go on to a bigger question to grapple with. So Lynn, if you can put us into breakout groups and we'll discuss that. Looks like we're going to be back. Nancy and Pamela, would you share what you all are discussing in Google Pixel 3? I would love to hear kind of what do the different generations value and what's the best way to lead them. You all had a great discussion. Both groups did.
Sure, Pamela, I'll start and you please interrupt me when I get it wrong here. So I guess I started by saying I apparently am part of the millennial generation. So but then I also lead kind of a team that has a lot of Gen Z or whatever the younger generation is. And one of the things I've noticed probably about them is that the work-life balance is very important. I don't have a lot who take their computers home if they're in the office, once the day is done and that sort of stuff. And then we work a lot, talk a lot about feelings. Feelings are very important, I think, to my team members, and I spend a lot of my management time honestly dealing with that sort of stuff. I work in kind of a very conservative office where most of our executive leadership team is older, and we were talking about some of the rules that are kind of in place that I struggle with from a recruitment standpoint and from a retention standpoint of it used to be we were in the office 5 days a week and we, wore suits to work every day and things like that. And my direct boss is 62 years old. So, and she's very open about that. And, that she will be retiring soon. And I never in my life thought she would ever, be okay with us doing remote work. But the pandemic has changed some of that. And as a manager, I have to be in the office 5 days a week, but my team only have to be in the office 2 days a week. So trying to change some of that culture and understanding kind of why we do the things we do and what is a must have versus what can flex and change.
Okay, great. No, that was a great discussion. Great points you bring there. And what's interesting is you bring up, but we're also hitting at what needs to change in organizations in order to attract and retain the younger generations. So the first group there, Kim, I know you joined that, and Janet, thoughts that you all discussed, anything that came up, any reaction to the other groups, Nancy and Pamela?
Oh, did you want to hear from the other group?
Yeah,
or?
I would love to hear what you're all just kind of just give us a summary what you all discussed.
Yeah, I think that the recurring theme was about the younger generation really wanting to have a voice in their career path and their career choices. And, the younger generation also feeling that they want to be able to set more boundaries around, their work-life balance and what's expected of them in the office versus outside of the office. What I had shared that I found interesting was having worked in an office where I managed a very large group of millennials and Gen Z folks, and they were the dominant workforce at that company. That they actually were very quick to build connections and community with their coworkers, because they also had a lot more free time available to spend outside of the office, right? These were folks who were, hadn't married yet, didn't have young children at home. And so they forged a lot of connections through social activities. Really were interested in, as much as they wanted to set that boundary of, I'm working when I'm working and I'm off when I'm off. When they're off, they also wanted to hang out with their coworkers.
Yeah, so it seems like community is really important for them, those connections for that. Jen,
and I think
go ahead.
the other thing that came up was the notion that they're much more comfortable vocalizing what it is that they need from their career trajectory. Whereas I think those of us that were from previous generations almost expected, especially in large companies, for someone to tell us what the path was going to be and to sort of tap us on the shoulder when we were ready. Versus the millennial and Gen Z generation are, comfortable putting their ambitions out there and saying, how fast can I move to get to where I want to be, instead of waiting to be told.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Anything to add?
One component that we also discussed in our group was how we could learn from one another across the generations, which is key. That was something I know that Nancy in our group discussed as well. In addition to all the other information that's been brought forth, we really can learn from one another, and if we embrace it. Being a Gen Xer, I've learned that in the banking realm. Especially, you can learn so much. It's not, and I use the examples of technology. Even though I'm a technological person, I still can learn different things, different apps, different software, and they can explain it to me quickly and show me very quickly, and I love it. And I'm like, well, let me show you what I did. And they're like, we learn from one another. I think it's great. It's something to share.
And Pamela, you bring up a great point there. And one of the things it takes is that humility by senior leaders and kind of this openness to be acceptable that the younger people can teach you a lot. And especially coming out of business school or different schools, they've got the latest cutting edge. And the other thing is by being open to that, you create that interdependence to start building relationships. So that very powerful example on that. Anybody else? Anything to add to the discussion? And then I'll kind of share with you kind of what research says, but I think you all have kind of hit a lot of the highlights there.
I think just touching on what Pamela said, that, the way that we can all kind of learn from one another, it requires that humility to think about where we have a potential to add unique value. So you may have more junior folks on your team that have been in the workforce for fewer years, but have these fantastic technical skills and, have recent grads from top programs. What they may not have is the years of experience of seeing some of these challenging situations in a business environment and understanding more of that subtext or that nuance of, well, why would we want to do X instead of Y? They can model out for you with the best tools to tell you the answer if you do X or if you do Y, but the value that folks who may bring more experience to the workforce can share is some of that, the business context behind, why this has or hasn't worked in the past, or, what are the landmines to be thinking about in whatever your particular industry is.
And Kim, you bring up a powerful point there is now in an organization, it has got to be safe, and there's got to be opportunities for those younger people to voice and bring those ideas forward. And what's really powerful about that is the younger employees that are joining your organization, they're not blinded by the old way of doing things. And how we all do it. This is always the way we do it. We stop questioning, we stop looking, and these new people are coming in with new ideas, technology skills. And if we can create an environment where we're mixing both the new ideas with kind of the business savvy and experience, wow, what a powerful combination to move the organization forward. Again, as you said, it takes the humility and the openness and the curiosity to create a venue where people can share and that their ideas are welcome. And what's nice about this is now we're starting to get into kind of some of the techniques for leading the younger generation and what are those leadership styles we need to do. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to share with you what the research says, and you can kind of compare it to your notes and your discussion as far as the generations. And then I'll look at some of what the research says as far as considerations. And you've hit most of the considerations for leading the younger generation. And then I'll link it to two of probably the most prominent leadership theories on how to lead Gen Z. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. And again, if you have questions, let me know, and we'll just really have a discussion about it. But again, if you look at the generation as far as what the research says, the millennials, they view leaders as facilitators, coach, resource providers, and kind of creating connectivity. They do not view leaders as the experts. Okay. Google is the expert in all sorts of all knowledge, not leaders. Okay. And I'd like you to compare and contrast, but what the millennials, they like challenge and growth. This generation was the one that really first kind of talked about work-life balance. They didn't want to just have a job. They wanted to make sure they had family and be involved in their family. Very collaborative. They also want voice. Transparency is important because the millennials are digitally savvy and they get a lot of information on the network. The other thing, and I saw this in my children, is they want to serve a higher purpose. They want organizations that have a higher purpose, and they want to, and for them, it's not about working for 30, 40 years and getting a pension. It is about working something where my work life mattered. It made a contribution. And the other thing that they demand is a positive culture. And this goes back to that earned loyalty. For the millennials, you don't provide them what they need and meet their needs, they're going somewhere else. Okay. So it's up to the organizations to have a positive culture. The other thing is they value diversity and inclusion. They're very, connections are very important. The feedback and they're used to leveraging technology. So what I'm going to ask you to do now, they're 35% of the workforce and they're moving up into the senior leadership positions. Now, with the Gen Zs, and I'll share these slides with you here. Again, 5%, very similar to them. Leaders are just resource providers, facilitators, coach. But we talked about that as flexibility. Now you got to understand the Gen Zs, they're networked, they grew up during the pandemic, and they want flexibility. They want to have the option where I can work remotely, but at the same time, they want to be able to make connections in the work environment. They want to have flex hours. Again, positive work culture. The other thing about this generation is they want to join organizations that have a higher purpose, but also do good. So environment, social and governance issues are very important to this generation. And they want companies that are engaged in promoting a better thing. The other thing on this generation, they tend to think global. They're very interested in what's going on in the entire world. Transparency is critical for them. And again, the other thing is voice. These people have a lot of ideas. They want to voice. Both generations want to have autonomy. Tell us what needs to be done, and we'll figure out the how. Again, we mentioned individual consideration on this, and we also mentioned well-being. People want to talk about feelings. This generation expresses their feelings online. They're used to expressing their feelings and talking about feelings. So again, it's really important to be looking at general well-being of your people. We already talked about technology. The other thing about this generation is pay is important, and what they're looking for is equity. They share their salaries online and everything else, so they're going to be able to do a comparison. The other thing with student debts, they want to have a decent salary for what they're expected to do. So again, you want to look at that. They want training, innovation. They want to, how am I going to get up? The other thing on this generation to think about is career path is they don't think in the traditional career path as going up. They may have a more of a lattice career path where they're going to kind of zigzag around the organization to get development, to get growth, something that's interesting. So again, as leaders, we want to challenge them. Questions on this. And if you look at this, millennials and Gen Zs there's probably more similarities between the two generations than there are differences. Questions, thoughts, reactions. Go ahead.
I have a question for you, Pat.
Go ahead.
Do you know, I see right now that Gen Z is 5% of the workforce. Do you have any type of projection to know when we will see that number really grow? I mean, is it 10 years? Is it 5 years?
Well, what you're seeing is, and if you don't mind, I'm going to share the next slide with you. The baby boomers I think I read that there's about 1,000 business leader baby boomers retiring every, I think it's every month or something like that. So you're going to see that, the Gen Xers are going to be the senior leaders really shortly here. And then the millennials are going to be kind of the middle level managers and doing the translation. Interesting thing in the research, the Gen Zs want to be managed by millennials. That's who they want to work for. And you can see that there's similarity between them, the flexibility in different aspects. Now, the baby boomers, again, they're see the leaders as kind of the experts. They kind of get sample input, but they're usually making a decision. And you can see the hard work, loyalty, duty, all that was kind of part of that Gen baby boomers. And I think one of the participants were talking about their bank manager was a baby boomer getting ready to retire in different aspects. And then we have the Gen X. Again, they're collaboration. They're really the first generation that started talking work-life balance, personal growth, and integrity. So differences in the generations and the values, and it just says that as leaders, we got to understand the generations, what they value, and we got to meet those values in the workplace. Otherwise, the younger generations, they will go. They'll go somewhere else to find it. Questions or reaction on the different generations?
I have a little bit of a comment / maybe
Go
a
ahead,
question.
Nancy.
So one of the things that I find really interesting about this is the kind of divide between viewing leaders as facilitators versus viewing leaders as experts. And you said something about how Gen Zers want to work for millennials. They want their managers to be millennials. However, I would say maybe as personal experience and maybe as industry experience, and I'm in the healthcare industry, there seems to be a void of millennial leaders that there tends to be more of the baby boomer kind of generation that is having the leadership roles right now and not a lot of upward movement. Is there anything in the research that kind of speaks to how this is going to change, if at all. And it seems like it's a painful change happening right now.
Painful change, but the other thing you're looking at is the baby boomers are redefining retirement. A lot of them are hanging out and staying on. They don't want to retire. It's not, getting 65, finding the rocking chair or everything else. They want to stay engaged. So what organizations, and this is one of the challenges they have to do, is they got to create space at the top in order to have upward mobility. Because if somebody looks at, hey, I can't move up, and those places are occupied by more senior people, they're going to move somewhere else to where they can get that upward mobility. So how does organizations maintain that experience from the older generations, but at the same time have room for them to move up? And again, some of them are engaging in kind of phased retirement aspects there. Or can you move them into where, the senior leaders are, there's mobility going up, but you're still retaining and they're still advising in different aspects. So a lot of companies are grappling with that. And so, Nancy, you bring up a great question there. And that's something that, the organizations are going to have to figure out. Or do you put a mandatory retirement? You hurt a certain age and then you move to a different aspect in the organization. And you leave, a growth trajectory for people to move up. Great question. Absolutely great question. And for leaders, you're going to have 4 generations in the workforce. It's just the reality. And how do you manage that and the egos of the older people and working with the younger people in different aspects? And how do you get it to when you start to have the millennials leading the older people? And having that environment and that culture where we're humble enough to know that these people are the best qualified, they have the ideas, and they can move the organization forward on them.
Well, and I think there are formal and informal structures for how we think about, creating opportunity for that next generation of millennials to become managers. So I think that the old paradigm of, well, the millennials should just stay in whatever function they're in whatever company they're in, and then just, kind of progressively wait and move up. I think what good organizations are doing are thinking about the skills that those millennials possess and saying, how can we get creative about where we deploy them in the organization? Maybe it is a formal assignment, a rotational assignment, or maybe it's just getting them involved in projects that are giving them that broader exposure and that are preparing them to take on a broader set of responsibilities. Because as you mentioned, they are valuing that their career is going to not necessarily always grow linearly, and that they may change functions or, bounce around the organization.
Kim, you bring up a powerful point here, and you're kind of hitting it. As organizations, people have to redefine there is no traditional career path. And for the millennials and the Gen Zs, maybe there's something about lateral assignments and into different functions, and you're building kind of an organizational awareness, and they're probably better apt to lead by having these different experiences and understanding the different parts of the organization. And the other key thing is, by giving them those opportunities to get into the different assignments, you are challenging them and periodically challenge them. They're not going to sit and do the same thing. They want to have different challenges and different aspects. So, again, there's going to be multiple career trajectories to the top, and the organization's got to realize the value in it and see that if somebody works laterally for 3 to 4 or 5 years, then they're still eligible for promotion. They're not timed out. And we've got to see who's the best qualified. So great point. And how do we create those multiple paths to the top if somebody so desires? So we're hitting at, that businesses and organizations are going to have to do some change in here to address this. So let's look at the kind of the considerations for leading the generation. And these are some of the points here. You all mentioned here is that younger generations want to have clear goals, want to know what the metrics are, and how do we be successful. And again, and then they want regular developmental feedback from their people. How am I doing? What can I do better? transparency, and they want to have a voice. So they want their leaders to seek their views and their ideas. We already talked about the challenge, give them the autonomy. We talked purpose. The other thing is really important for the younger generations. Leader has got to see how their individual contributions link to the organization's purpose. They want to know that their work life matters and that it's appreciated. So again, we've got to make that link to it. Trusting relationships are critical. We already talked that. Work-life balance. Again, we talk flexibility and boundaries. They want specific boundaries between work and life, and you want to respect them, especially with technology. It's easy to blur those boundaries, but it's up to leaders to set those boundaries, and we're only going to cross them unless it's an emergency. It's not standard practice to cross it. It's an emergency, which means now we've got to plan and manage the workload. And then again, we talk career per action, multiple paths, total well-being, we talked, and community. These people are used to being connected. They want the community, they want the relationships. And again, we have to have that culture of that values winning, being successful, but diversity, inclusion. You got to remember the Gen Zs are the most diverse generation entering the workforce. And they value diversity and inclusion, and they're going to expect it from their organizations. And I already talked about doing good. They want to be part of organizations that are doing good and helping making the world a better place. So these are the considerations. I want to just introduce you to two prominent leadership theories right now. The first one, and this is probably the most well-researched leadership theory, and it is linked to performance both at the leader level and the organization level. Transformational leadership has 4 categories of behavior. The younger generations, they want their leaders to be the role models. They walk the talk. They follow the organization's values. They're competent and dependable, and they get results. They'll make sure that the organization wins. The other one is they're going to create a compelling vision for the team or the organization. And these younger generations want to know where they're moving towards, and it's got to be exciting. I already talked about the higher purpose and the higher standards, but we make it very clear. These are the standards, these are the metrics, and we're giving feedback and to help them move to meet the high standards. Again, individual consideration is really important. We get to know people. We understand their interests and needs. We try to give them assignments and opportunities to meet those interests and needs. We already talked about that coaching, regular coaching and feedback and developmental feedback to help them grow and develop. And then transformational leaders are reflecting potential. You're looking at the potential, you're reflecting it back to people, and then giving them opportunities to realize it. And then intellectual stimulation. And this is probably the hardest one for leaders. Are we allowing our younger people to challenge the way things are being done? 7 most dangerous words you'll ever hear in your organization. We've always done it that way. The external environment is always changing. So do we have a venue for those new people coming in with fresh eyes to challenge the way we're doing it? Are we leveraging their skills? And if we're giving our younger people the autonomy, are we able to underwrite mistakes? The younger people got great ideas and everything else, but as they implement the ideas, they may make mistakes. And as leaders, we got to underwrite them. So transformational leaders are designed to transform the way the people think about their work, kind of their attitudes and values towards the work and towards the organization. It is a values-based aspect there. It is very relational based. And again, it talks about higher purpose. It talks about compelling vision. So you're tapping into those internal motivators with people. And for the younger generation, those internal motivators are very powerful. They want to have a purpose. They want to have autonomy. They want to realize their potential, and they want to have powerful connections. The other leadership theory that is a lot of international organizations are adopting this is more of a servant leadership behavior. And what we mean by servant is that leaders gain a sense of purpose by serving and uplifting the people in the organization and working for an organization that has a powerful, compelling purpose. And again, leaders are investing time in getting to know and building trust with their people. They are developing their people. They engage in developmental feedback, and they're looking at working to develop the organization. They place the interest of the people in the team before their own. They empower their people. They give them the autonomy, and they view that we're in a partnership with our people. I'm going to meet with you on a regular basis. We're going to check in to see how you're doing. I want the younger generation to give me feedback. If they have obstacles, I'm going to help you work to reduce those obstacles. That's my job as a leader. And I'm giving you developmental feedback to make sure that you are going to be successful and you're winning. I'm going to hold you accountable. But it is a partnership the way I do it. And I'm giving you feedback developmentally. I'm not trying to penalize you or anything else. It's all about growth and development. And I have a culture that is psychologically safe and it's values based. Again, you can see two very, very powerful leadership theories. The relational base, you're building trust, you're working with people to develop and grow, and you're investing in their developing and growing. And if you look at them, these two theories kind of match those 10 things that you need to do to lead the younger generation. I would argue that regardless of the generation you're from, these are probably very powerful leadership theories to lead people. But especially the younger generation. These are all tapping internal motivators. It's all about building relationships. It takes more time on the leader's part to engage in these behaviors. Any questions on these two leadership theories? Now, the other one is a lot of organizations are adapting servant leadership or service leader or selfless leadership, and the way they're doing, the reason they're doing it, it tends to drive performance. People are fully engaged, they're developing, and they feel that their work is serving a greater one. One example of an organization that has really kind of been the hallmark of servant leadership is Southwest Airlines. And they've done it for years, this servant leadership culture, and you can feel it when you fly Southwest. And prior to the pandemic, they had 35 years of success in winning. And now they're kind of coming back out of it. And then what I'm going to, the final one I'd like you to kind of grapple with, we can do this as a group here. We've kind of started to point out, but the biggest thing that leaders that I've experienced, that I've worked with here, that they're grappling with is who changes? Does the organization and businesses change their policy, procedure, practices, and culture to adopt and meet the needs of the younger generation? Or do the younger generation change their values and views in order to fit in with businesses and organization? So I'm going to throw that out on the floor, and thoughts or reactions to it, because I know there's some companies that are saying, hey, this is the way we do business. The younger people need to kind of just suck it up and adjust to it. Or how do you create a business to lead and attract and retain the younger generation?
We talked a little bit about this in our group, and in terms of, I have a very, kind of older executive leadership team, and then I have a very young particular person on my team who does not fit the mold of what my executive leadership team believes someone on their team should look like. It's all about the way this person looks, and it's not anything that's bad or violating dress code or anything like that. It's just difference in generations. And one of the things we talked about is trying to come together and kind of understand, I have a dialogue with my leaders to say, well, he's not doing anything that is inappropriate, or, like, you guys are going to have to give some leeway there. Whereas I also have that same conversation to say, there's a perception that you give off based on, these things, unfortunately, and let's try to, a little bit of trying to find some middle ground there. So I would say in some respects, I think it's a little bit of both. It's interesting today. So I work in healthcare, and I think in healthcare, especially when you talk about doctors and nurses, and that relationship culturally between doctors and nurses is ingrained in the culture that the doctor is in charge and the nurse does what the doctor tells them. Well, in this new world of your workforce, your nursing workforce is younger and younger and younger, that is something we talked about with a group of physicians today is, you guys have a role to play about the culture of your department and your organization. And first of all, everybody's hurting for nurses, but you have impact if you are helpful and a mentor as opposed to a dictator, So in that respect, we're kind of trying to bridge both ways to accommodate from both perspectives.
Nancy, you bring up a powerful point here. And two of them really, what's interesting is, business organization, I heard they're going to have to change their dress policies and, allow people to be themselves within whatever the standard is. I know somebody, I think, Pamela, you mentioned you work in the banking industry. If I'm going to engage with anybody in the banking industry, I'm going to have minimum business casual with a coat on, or I'm going to wear a suit and tie. Now that's the industry standard. So now what we're talking about, not only do we have to change our organization standards, we got to change the industry standards. And Nancy, you mentioned that with doctors and nurses, that has always been a status differential in the medical. The doctors are the boss. They are the know-it-all and everything else. And how do we adjust that in the medical profession? So now not only we're talking about professional standards in culture that we have to adjust and change. So we're looking at, the bigger picture. This is a monster thing that we have to get our hands on. So great points on that. Other thoughts on this? Businesses are grappling with this right now.
I think one of the things that's going to be really interesting is for the millennial and Gen Z folks, the recent turbulence in the economy is really their first exposure to, working through some might call it a semi-recession or a challenging economic environment. So things that they may have held dear to them as sort of sacrosanct and, hey, if I graduated from a top university and I'm in a competitive field, whether it be tech, whether it be, retail startups, healthcare startups, things like that, the things that they were valuing, now that they're seeing that the pendulum has shifted to the other side, a lot of their friends are getting laid off. I think there will be some sense of them, some sense of those groups maybe reevaluating what really matters. Is it, hey, do I have to be in an office that has this like amazing startup vibe and has, free cold brew kegs and all this other stuff? Or would I rather actually work somewhere that maybe not have to worry about changing jobs every 6 months and be in a place that's a little bit more stable, albeit it might be what they would perceive as a more traditional environment?
Okay. Give me a great point. There is reality is probably a great teacher. And if you notice if you've been reading the Wall Street Journal, is the big tech companies are laying off thousands of people. Matter of fact, I think it was Google announced today, or one of them announced another 10,000 people are being laid off. Guess where the Gen Zs want to work? They love technology companies. And so again, you're now going to get a flood of these people laid off. And again, they may be looking at that, the free lunches, cold brew cakes are not as that. But the question you got to ask yourself as businesses and organizations, we probably still need to shape a positive culture to where people are valued, they have voice and all that. And maybe we don't have to have all these extra amenities. But again, for those younger generations, are they still going to be looking for organizations that have purpose, positive cultures in different aspects? So I concur. Experience reshapes values and priorities real quickly. And then, as you mentioned, as these younger generations, as they marry and they start having families, if they so choose, then your priorities and what you look for, being able to support your family is critical. And so again, you still want to work in a positive environment, but you also want to have some stability in different aspects because other people are dependent on you. So as they progress and grow, experience comes in, and kind of life circumstances also will start reshaping those values. And how does organizations adapt themselves to help support workers throughout their life cycles and meeting those important needs throughout their life cycles and promoting well-being. Different way of looking at it in organizations and businesses. It's not just the career path, it's how do we support them and help them grow and meet their needs. So Kim, great, absolutely phenomenal point. Others, any other points, thoughts, reflections?
I'm just looking at them also, not just the millennials or the Gen Zers, and I totally agree with stability, but I also understand, being that I'm currently in an unemployment phase myself, as a contractor who just finished her contract within the banking system, reinventing yourself, entrepreneurship. What is it that you like? What is it that they like? Nancy said something, and I think Kim touched on it too. It's kind of meeting in the middle. Not saying, because the bottom line is the bottom line, you still have to do whatever the organization is there to do, but there's got to be somewhere that we can meet in the middle and bring the talents and gifts of the younger generation and kind of put them into the melting pot so that we can grow together. That's the way that I look at it going forward, even in my own search. And I know we're kind of like the invisible generation, Generation X, but we need to start speaking our truth. Our transparency will help if we share more, not be so scared to try something new, because I'm actually in the process myself of reinventing myself. And who would have thought that at this stage in my life? I never thought it. I was on that path. I get my education, move forward, get this, move forward, the traditional path. But I'm learning you have to utilize that flexibility. And I'm learning that more so from the younger generations as well.
And Pamela, absolutely phenomenal point. And you two are touching on this kind of this reverse mentoring aspect there, learning from it, reinventing yourself. The other things you'll find about the millennials is they're not afraid to do that and shift career paths. I've got my two youngest, we're both in career paths. My son was working at Google as an economist, making great money, and he started volunteering at a hospital and realized that he had a passion for medicine. So he left and pursued medicine. And I looked at it and said, man, I probably would have never had the courage to do that. But he was just saying, Dad, I want my work life to matter. I want to have a purpose. So again, they're courageous and they're not afraid to reinvent themselves, and they have the confidence they can do it. So I agree, Pam, we can learn a lot from the younger generation. Other thoughts? I know we got about a minute left. Any other thoughts, reactions to this? And I just hope you all could be the change agents in your businesses and organizations and help them kind of navigate this, because I just feel that businesses and organizations that do not change their culture and P4S2s to meet the needs and values of the younger generation are going to have a hard time. And again, meeting the needs, meet in the middle. You still got to get the mission done. Organizations still got to win, but how do we do it where we can create an environment where we attract and retain our young generational workers? Well, it's 1 o'clock. I greatly appreciate the discussion. Very stimulating. I'll share those slides with you so you have that information. And this is really exciting. You made my day, so thank you. And if you have questions, I'll stay on afterwards. So thank you.